He stood on his front porch, calm, collected, and begged the world to help him find his missing family. But what no one knew was that he already knew exactly where they were. A pregnant wife, 2 little girls, a quiet Colorado home. How does a father become the last person his family should ever trust? This is the story of Chris Watts and the lie that fooled the world. Frederick, Colorado, a calm suburban town where neighbors waved, kids rode bikes, and nothing ever seemed out of place. On Saratoga Trail stood a large beige home with a bright blue door. Inside the house lived Shanann Watts, 34 years old, energetic, organized, social, 15 weeks pregnant with her 3rd child. Her daughters, Bella Watts, 4 years old, quiet and gentle, Celeste Watts, 3 years old, playful and expressive, and their father, Chris Watts, soft-spoken, reserved, described by many as calm. From the outside, they look like a normal American family, maybe even a happy one. But sometimes, normal is just what people choose to show. If you scrolled through Shanann's Facebook page, you would see laughter. You would see birthday decorations, kitchen dances, pregnancy announcements, and smiling selfies. She often called Chris, "My amazing husband, the best dad ever, my rock." In one now famous video, she surprises him with news that she's pregnant again. He smiles, holds the test, says softly, "That's awesome." To viewers, it looked sweet. But years later, people would replay that clip and ask, was that excitement or something else? The truth is, social media shows moments, not realities. And behind the camera, things were changing. The Watts family had faced financial stress before. Reports revealed they had filed for bankruptcy in the past. Large mortgage payments, HOA fees, credit card balances. Shanann worked in direct sales and promoted products online. Chris worked in the oil industry at a company called Anadarko Petroleum. They were earning money, but they were also carrying pressure. And financial strain can quietly eat away at a relationship. Not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly. In 2018, something shifted. Chris had started a relationship with a coworker. Someone new, someone without children, someone who represented freedom. Text messages later revealed that he spoke about starting over, about wanting a different life, a smaller life, a simpler life, without responsibilities, without pressure. But there was one problem: his current life, his pregnant wife, his 2 daughters. Leaving would mean divorce, child support, public shame, and confrontation. But what if someone didn't want confrontation? What if they wanted silence instead? Shanann returned home from a business trip in Arizona around 2 a.m. Security footage from a neighbor's camera captured her walking into the house. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. According to Chris later, they had an emotional conversation. He claimed it was about their relationship. He said she went to bed. He said he left for work at 5:15 a.m. But by late morning, Shanann missed a doctor's appointment. Her friend became worried. She wasn't answering calls. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her car was still in the garage. Her purse was inside. The children's car seats were still there. That's when panic started. A friend contacted police for a welfare check. Officers arrived at the Watts home. Chris returned from work shortly after. Body camera footage would later be released to the public. In that footage, Chris seems uneasy. He talks quickly, smiles at odd moments, keeps checking his phone. He says maybe Shanann took the girls to a friend's house. But officers notice something strange. Her phone is still inside. Her medication is still there. No packed bags. No clear sign of leaving. The house looks normal. Too normal. It didn't look like someone had stormed out. It looked like someone had vanished. The next day, Chris stood outside his home. News cameras pointed at him. He said, "I just want them back." He folded his arms, looked directly into the lens, gave small, almost nervous smiles. Across America, people watched. Some felt sympathy. Others felt a chill. Something didn't match. There were no tears, no desperation, no urgency in his voice. Just calm. And sometimes, calm in the wrong moment can feel louder than panic. Days later, investigators focused on Chris's workplace, a remote oil field operated by Anadarko Petroleum. He had visited a specific site early that morning. Cell phone data placed him there. When authorities searched the area, they made a devastating discovery. Shanann's body was located buried near the site, and the two little girls were found inside separate oil tanks. The nation was stunned. A father, a husband, a man who had just stood in front of cameras asking for help, now at the center of something unthinkable. Shortly after the discovery, Chris Watts was taken into custody. At first, he denied everything. Then he gave a partial story, then another version. But the evidence was mounting. Digital data, surveillance footage, phone records, and inconsistencies in his timeline. The calm man on television was now sitting in an interrogation room, alone, and the truth was getting closer. But here's the question that still haunts this case. Was this a sudden decision made in anger? Or was it planned? Did he wake up that morning knowing exactly what he would do? Or did something happen in that late-night conversation that changed everything? He thought he could control the story. For days, the world had seen him as a worried husband, a father desperate for answers. But now, sitting alone in that small interrogation room, the silence felt heavier than the cameras ever did. Across the table, investigators watched carefully, not aggressively, not emotionally, just patiently. They let him talk. At first, he repeated the same version. Shanann came home. They talked. He left for work. He didn't know what happened after that. But the evidence was already moving in a different direction. Phone data placed him at a remote oil site early that morning. A neighbor's security camera showed him backing his truck into the driveway, something he rarely did. He said it was normal, routine, but it didn't look routine. It looked deliberate. As the hours passed, the calmness that once worked in front of news cameras began to fade. Then came the polygraph. He agreed to it confidently. He believed he could outlast the questions. Before the test began, the examiner gave him one last chance. If there's anything you need to tell us, this is the time. He said there wasn't, but the machine told another story. When the results came back, the examiner didn't hesitate. You did not pass. The room shifted. For the first time, his breathing changed. His posture softened. The confidence cracked. That was when the first version of the truth appeared. He claimed Shanann had done something unthinkable. He said he reacted emotionally. He tried to place the blame somewhere else. But even as he spoke, it felt rehearsed. Investigators knew the timeline didn't match. The physical evidence didn't support it. The house showed no chaos that would suggest sudden panic. So they waited, and eventually, he changed his story again. In November 2018, Chris Watts stood in court and pleaded guilty. No trial, no dramatic defense, no long public battle, just a quiet admission. He acknowledged ending the life of Shanann Watts inside their home. He admitted driving away before sunrise, admitted going to the oil site operated by Anadarko Petroleum. He admitted what happened there. The details were devastating, not because they were loud or chaotic, but because they were controlled, measured, planned. That's what unsettled people the most. There was no explosion of rage visible in the home, no sign of forced entry, no broken furniture, just quiet. The kind of quiet that hides intention. The motive slowly became clearer. He had started a new relationship, someone who represented freedom, a different life, a simpler future. Text messages revealed excitement about starting over, about firsts, about imagining life without responsibility. But divorce would have meant financial consequences, child support, public scrutiny, a long legal process. And instead of facing those realities, he chose to erase them. Investigators believe he wanted a clean break, not a complicated one, and that decision would define him forever. In the courtroom, when sentencing arrived, there were no surprises. Multiple life sentences, no possibility of parole. He would never walk free again. The man who once stood outside his home, arms folded, asking the world to help him find his family, would now spend the rest of his life behind concrete walls. But even after the confession, the country struggled to understand. How does someone appear so ordinary, so calm, so emotionally flat, while planning something so final? Psychologists later described him as conflict avoidant. someone who internalized frustration, someone who struggled to confront uncomfortable conversations. Instead of expressing dissatisfaction, instead of choosing separation honestly, he chose silence, permanent silence. And perhaps that's what makes this story linger. There are no loud warning signs, no public history of violence, no neighbors reporting chaos, just a gradual emotional withdrawal, a double life, a smile on camera that didn't match reality. The image of the perfect family, carefully shared online, now feels haunting because while Shanann Watts was planning baby names, imagining a future, her husband was imagining one without her. The contrast is chilling. Two completely different realities existing under one roof. And in the end, the truth didn't explode. It unraveled, piece by piece. Data, surveillance, confession, until there was nothing left to hide behind. Today, Chris Watts remains incarcerated for life. The house has new owners. The oil site still operates. The neighborhood is quiet again. But the memory of that week in August 2018 still lingers across America. Because sometimes, the most disturbing stories aren't about strangers. They're about the people who look the most ordinary. The ones who stand calmly in front of cameras and already know the ending.